Ethan Lin, you said you always dream of another you. I looked up at the pale young man. Yes. When did it start? 17. How old are you now? 35. But your previous medical record says 27. I frowned slightly, looking at him carefully. He was too thin, and the dark bruises under his eyes were particularly noticeable. Right, 27. The me, in the dream, is 35. He touched his face and smiled sheepishly. I took my pen and wrote down in the medical record, impaired consciousness and disordered judgment. Occupation, painter. Can you show me your paintings? She did follow the victims. Yes. He took out a tablet from his backpack, opened his online exhibition, and handed it to me. I was taken aback. His paintings had actually won the world's highest art award, the Alexander Leach Painting Award. There were not many paintings in the exhibition, but the overall style was bizarre and mysterious, as if they were not scenes from this world. There were 3 representative paintings, depicting a bloody green-haired severed hand, an island surrounded by a graveyard, and a group of roaring hairy monsters. I felt a cold sweat down my spine. Postmodernism and the Picasso of our time were written prominently on the webpage poster. Are these all scenes from your dreams? I handed the tablet back to him. Yes, I've been having this dream ever since I picked up a drifting bottle by a big river when I was 17. Can you tell me about it? Ish. Long. I finished writing the last word, adjusted my sitting posture, and looked at the thin young man. I dream of killing and fighting monsters. Who killed you? And who is fighting monsters? Idhor. I frowned again. No, I killed others. No, I killed myself. Others killed me. And I also fought monsters. I couldn't help but see. On the paper, I wrote, language dysfunction, paranoid tendencies. Can you elaborate? Can you elaborate? Any detail? Yes. He licked his lips and began to tell me about the dream he had been having for 10 years. A blood moon hung alone in the sky, crows croaked, a sign of chaos. Liam and I, my buddy, came to the ancient cemetery in Black Creek Town 2 days ago to complete a project. We wanted to try our luck and see what we could find. Since all the hotels around the cemetery were full, we had to make do with the small wooden house where Oscar the gravedigger used to live. Perhaps it was the unfamiliarity, or perhaps it was the unusual astronomical phenomenon last night, but I had a restless night and slept very poorly. Open the door quickly. My friends, something's happened. It was Oscar's voice. I looked at my watch. 5:30. Liam was startled awake by the sound of knocking on the door and sat up. I jumped up, bare feet on the cold floor, and went to open the door. Oscar rushed in with a pale face, panting, and handed me a box. Ethan, take a look. It was a box slightly larger than a palm. It was carved and simple, with a smooth texture. It was made of black sandalwood and covered with a layer of deep red and shiny patina. It was obviously an old object. I took the box, pressed the switch lightly, and with a crisp pop, the box opened. I only needed one glance at the contents of the box to feel my heart skip a beat. Curled up on yellow silk cloth was a severed hand. I didn't know what kind of animal it was, covered with dark green fluff. The fluff seemed to be alive, wriggling slightly in the dim yellow light. At the top of the fluff were tiny eyes, like snail tentacles. Blood oozed from the severed palm, but the dark red blood glowed fluorescent green, like a viper's eyes. I took a deep breath, suppressed the tremor in my heart, closed the box with a snap, clutched it in my hand, and felt cold sweat down my back. This severed hand, I had seen it before. When I was 17, I walked into an art gallery after school one day as if possessed. I saw a painter's solo exhibition. There were many long-haired monsters in the paintings, a mysterious island, and a strange severed hand. The indescribable atmosphere of mystery and strangeness drew me in like a vortex. Since then, I have been fascinated by mysterious species. In college, I majored in mysterious species research, studied under Professor Benedict, and became a researcher of mysterious species, after completing my master's and doctoral degrees. Excuse me, but may I interrupt? No, you, in your dream, saw your own exhibition, and you engaged in mysterious species research because you saw your own exhibition. Tatum, I couldn't help but interrupt. The young man in front of me scratched his head and said, "Yes, that's what I meant." My paintings had a great influence on his life. However, I was not aware of it at the time, and I had never met him in reality. According to you, he is older than you. Why did he see your exhibition when he was 17? You shouldn't have started painting then, right? I don't know that either. Maybe it's a time-space displacement. I quickly wrote down a few words in the medical record, confused thinking, schizotypal personality disorder. I said to him, "Please continue." Liam opened the box and almost threw it on the ground. "Where did you get this?" I asked her. "Well, wasn't it the day before yesterday, the third day after you arrived, that there was a small earthquake? The place where you live may not be obvious, but the town shook violently. The day after the earthquake, a small island appeared in the center of the Black River, near the town. Yesterday, the town organized 5 or 6 people to go to the island to check it out. Damn it, all of them disappeared. They waited all night, but none of them came back. This morning, a fisherman in the town caught the severed hand in box while fishing. He was so scared that he pet his pants and gave it to me. You guys are doing some research on mysterious species, so I brought it to you to see what kind of monster severed hand it is. Do you think the people sent to the island by the town were eaten by this monster?" "Ethan, the severed hand looks very strange. Do you know what it is?" Liam asked. "Even if I had seen it, so what?" "Over the years, I have consulted many ancient books, but to no avail. I'm not sure. It could be something like a green-haired zombie." "Have you called the police?" Liam asked her as he got dressed. "There is no signal in the mountains. We sent someone out of the mountains to call the police, but there is no signal on the mobile phone either. We don't know when the police will arrive. Let's go and have a look." I put on my clothes, took my binoculars, and said to Oscar. Our place was about a mile from the river. Lean and I followed Oscar, 1 foot deep and 1 foot shallow, hurrying towards the river. When we reached the river, the east was tinged with a faint red glow. The light mist on the river surface, like a veil, was gradually thinning under the sunlight. A crescent-shaped island gradually emerged in the center of the river. I have to say, although it was a river, it was quite wide. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to call it vast. I picked up my binoculars and looked towards the island. There was not much vegetation on the island. An ancient building that looked like a church stood alone in the heart of the island. Round mounds, like steamed buns, surrounded the outside layer by layer, with broken tombstones scattered in between. Reflected in the faint morning mist, it looked even more desolate and eerie. There are not enough people in town now. Their families are very anxious, so they thought that you two are good at fighting, and have seen a lot, and wanted to ask you to help, and go with me to have a look. Oscar spoke sincerely, almost kneeling down to beg us. This middle-aged man used to be a policeman. He was injured in an operation and couldn't continue his work, so he had to come to Black Creek Town to be a gravedigger. Do you have any weapons? I asked her. This island looked very strange, and we wouldn't dare to go there without any weapons to defend ourselves. Yes, shotguns. I'll go back and get them. Liam and I also had to go back to get our equipment, so we made an appointment with Oscar to meet at the river in half an hour. When Liam and I arrived at the river again with our backpacks, we found the residents in a mess, as if something terrible had happened. We stopped a resident and asked only to find out that a monster had appeared. Just now, a monster covered in green hair crawled out of the water and staggered towards the town. The discoverer called all the people in the town, took their farming tools and shotguns, and attacked the monster. The monster let out a shrill scream and was shot by Oscar. It fled towards the water. Liam and I hurried to the river. Just as we squeezed out of the crowd and saw the monster, which was about the size of an adult man, it jumped into the water. At the same time, several gunshots rang out. The water monster, accompanied by a cloud of blood mist, fell into the water with a plop and disappeared. We hit it. Several young men who fired the shots jumped up and down excitedly. Shot several times, the monster was probably doomed. But after searching the river, the residents found nothing and dared not go into the water to check. They had to return to the town dejectedly. The families of the residents, who went to the island yesterday, came to the water's edge. Seeing the scene, they couldn't help but burst into tears, and were persuaded to go back by Oscar. I found 3 shotguns, one for each of us. They all have silencers. Oscar put one on his back, and handed one to Liam and me each. I wasn't very good at shooting, especially with this kind of shotgun. Liam, on the other hand, was not ambiguous, and would touch any gun. I have a few tactical daggers here that can cut iron like mud. Liam took out 2 strangely shaped daggers from his bag and handed them to Oscar and me. I gave Liam and Oscar an electric baton each. Those of us in this line of work often work in the wild, and these are all necessities. While Oscar went to prepare the boat, Liam rubbed his hands together as he looked at the misty river. Either this time, our loser brothers have come to the right place. Not only can we be chivalrous and righteous, but we might also be able to bring back the whole monster. In this way, both of our projects will be solved. By then, let's see who else dares to call us scum. Indeed, his trip would not only help the residents find their relatives, but also allow us to explore mysterious creatures along the way. If we could capture undiscovered mysterious species, we could comfort my deceased mentor, Professor Benedict. Since the founding of the People's Republic of China, it is not allowed to become a spirit, and even if you do, you are not allowed to show off. By my generation, the study of mysterious species has become a dead end. My mentor, Professor Benedict, spent his whole life studying blurry photos of Mothman and the Loch Ness Monster, and died without producing a decent physical object or clear photo. Therefore, our major and the next door, biological engineering major, were jokingly called the pipe dream Scum Alliance major by others. Coincidentally, I was the only seedling in the mysterious species research major, and my buddy Liam was a grain of quasi-scum among the many pseudo-elites in the biological engineering major. When a streak of blood Colored clouds appeared on the horizon. The three of us, wearing life jackets, set off towards the island in a motorboat. Ethan, Oscar, do you hear anything? The motorboat's noise was loud and Liam shouted. Oscar listened attentively. Yes, it sounds like someone is crying. No, it wasn't crying. It was a roar, a desperate and shrill roar. The three of us looked at each other, and Oscar, and I pulled out the electric batons from our waists in unison. There seems to be someone on the island. Oscar pointed his electric baton ahead. I picked up my binoculars, but I didn't see anything but the island's old and dilapidated buildings and rows of mounds. When we were about 7 or 8 minutes away from the island, something swam rapidly under the water. The huge waves it brought up rolled and rolled over, almost overturning the boat and pushing it far away. Liam tried his best to stabilize the motorboat, while Oscar and I stood guard with electric batons in hand. A layer of cold sweat broke out on my back, and I was panting heavily, gripping the electric baton tightly in my hand. When I went to Africa to look for Mongolian deathworms last year, I got severe malaria twice. After I recovered, my nervous system was damaged, and I was prone to nausea, headaches, weakness, and rapid heartbeat. I really didn't know if I would faint and fall into the water when danger struck. Just as we were a stone's throw away from the island, a dark green figure jumped out of the water and rushed straight towards the motorboat. I instinctively raised my electric baton to block it, but the monster slapped it away, and it fell into the water. Then the monster knocked me onto the boat. With a thud, the wooden box on my body fell onto the boat, due to the sudden impact. The box was shaken open, and the severed hand rolled out. But at this moment, I couldn't care less about the severed hand in the box. I held the monster's slimy forelimbs with all my strength, desperately dodging its attacks. Oscar was quick-witted. The moment the monster opened its bloody mouth and was about to bite my head, he stabbed the dagger into its neck and then made a horizontal cut. The monster's head fell into the water like a watermelon, leaving only its twitching body spraying blood on the boat. Oscar kicked the headless body into the river with a flying kick. Thick blood fell along, with its body splattering all over the boat, and the three of us, leaving us in a sorry state. As soon as the monster's body fell into the river, it turned a strange red, and there was a creepy sweet chewing sound from the water. I collapsed on the boat like mud, sweating profusely, my whole body limp. I fumbled with my few movable fingers, picked up the wooden box, closed it, put it back on my body, but the severed hand was gone. I don't know if it was taken into the water by the monster during the fight just now. Oscar picked up his shotgun and fired at the water. The chewing sound in the water gradually disappeared, and a larger area of fluorescent green blood spread around the boat. "Hold on tight," Liam shouted, "damn it," and desperately steered the boat towards the island. The boat rushed onto the shore for more than 10 meters with inertia. The water only calmed down for a moment. As we hurriedly disembarked, there were splashing sounds, one after another in the water. Waves, one after another, with a stench rushed towards the beach of the island. Following the waves, one after another, green humanoid monsters crawled up. Damn it, this monster was actually amphibious, like a crocodile. "Run," Oscar shouted at us as he limped back, shooting his gun. Lee and I each grabbed a bag of supplies and ran wildly towards the island, crossing over mounds, one after another. There was a loud crash behind us. I looked back and saw 2 monsters fighting over our boat, tearing the motorboat in half. Oscar retreated while fighting. "Ethan, Oscar, this way. Quick, there's a church ahead," Liam shouted to us. I looked up and saw that the ancient building was indeed a church. It looked quite old. The plaque above the church door was no longer legible. Although the gate was old and decayed, it was quite thick and should be able to withstand some impact. Carrying supplies, I panted and ran forward, the church swaying in front of me. A monster jumped out from nowhere, grabbed my shoulder, opened its big mouth, and roared at me. I don't know if it was my illusion, but it seemed to be saying to me, "Go back. Go back quickly." I was terrified. I took out my dagger and stabbed it with all my strength at the palm that was grabbing my clothes. The tactical dagger was indeed extremely sharp. With a scream from the monster, I felt myself loosen, and warm blood spurted out from its severed wrist. Oscar rushed up and shot it. It rolled on the ground and rolled back into the river, disappearing without a trace. Panting, the three of us pushed open the church door and only realized that the monsters hadn't followed us at all. Instead, they were hiding in the shade of the trees and roaring. We didn't know whether they were afraid of the sun or didn't dare to approach the church. Neither possibility boded well for us. If they were afraid of the sun, they would attack once the sun went down. If they were afraid of the church, what was it about the church that made these terrifying monsters so afraid? But we had no choice now. As soon as we closed the church door, and hadn't even turned around, Liam pointed at my shoulder and said, with a terrified expression, "What the hell is that on your shoulder?" My hair stood on end. I turned my head and saw that the monster's palm, which had been cut off by me just now, was still hanging on my clothes, refusing to let go. I had been quite regretful that I had lost the severed hand in the box on the boat earlier, but now I had accidentally obtained a new one. I felt a lot more at ease. Even if we couldn't catch the monster, this severed hand alone would be enough for us to make a name for ourselves in the academic world. I almost hummed a tune as I put the severed hand into the box. However, the moment the severed hand was put into the box, a sense of familiarity surged from the bottom of my heart. Damn it, was it? Because the monsters all looked alike. This severed hand was exactly the same as the previous one, even the degree to which the fingers were curled and the cut on the wrist looked like they were made from the same mold. I rubbed my eyes hard, wanting to show it to Liam and Oscar for confirmation, but Liam pointed to the inside of the church with a pale face. Oscar had already raised his gun. I followed Oscar's gun and looked over. My scalp went numb, and all the hairs that had just been lying down stood up like a hedgehog's spines. In the dim light coming through the windows, a dozen or so corpses were hanging from the beams of the church. The feet of some of them had already turned into bones. Moreover, the rows of crosses hanging on the walls of the church also exuded a strange aura, making it even more eerie and terrifying. This scene, comparable to a horror movie, instantly sucked all the sweat I had just broken out back into my pores. "Ethan, what the hell kind of church is this? It's so creepy," Liam said, rubbing the goosebumps on his arms. "A cult church." I bypassed the corpses hanging above my head and looked around the church. The main hall of the church was very large, with side halls on both the east and west sides. There's no need for so many in it. Liam counted a total of 12 corpses. There were even more buried under the church. I'm afraid there were dead people under every single mound. So, this island probably wasn't an island before, but a stronghold of some kind of cult. Just in case, the three of us put on masks and began to search the church. From the main hall to the east and west side halls, we didn't find a single person, not even a single resident. Oscar covered us, while Liam and I walked around the church again. Apart from the graveyard, it was still the graveyard. We still didn't see a single person. Damn it, it's so strange. There's no sign of the living or the dead, Liam cursed. Ethan, Liam, do you think those people were really eaten by the monsters? Oscar pointed to the red-eyed, green-haired monsters, crouching in the shade of the trees by the river, grueling. That's highly possible. The sweat on my back instantly broke out. Judging from the combat effectiveness of these monsters, just now, even twice as many people wouldn't be enough to fill the gaps between their teeth. Damn it, if we can't find anyone, the few of us will be accounted for here. Liam was getting a little anxious. I said that I reckoned these monsters were afraid of the sun. There was still some time before dark. The boat was gone, so we had to find a way to leave this ghostly island. Then let's tie up a raft, Oscar said. Of course the premise is to kill all these monsters, he added. Indeed, under normal circumstances, a raft would barely be enough to carry the three of us. But if we were to encounter the same danger we did when we came, I'm afraid it would be difficult to return to the shore safely. When Liam heard this, he perked up and said that he was good at both tying rafts and fighting monsters. He rolled up his sleeves and called out to Oscar to empty out the supplies they had brought to the island and get the tools. It was dark inside the church, as if it was always shrouded in a layer of black mist. I lit candles and placed them everywhere in the church, illuminating the main hall as bright as day. The left and right side halls connected to it were bathed in a mixture of light and shadow. Just as Liam was about to throw a package on the ground, Oscar nervously grabbed it. Liam, you can't throw this. There's a pack of 10 concentrated explosives in it. If it explodes, none of us will be able to go back. Liam wiped the sweat from his forehead, gave Oscar a thumbs up, and gestured alike. I also added a timer, just in case. Oscar chuckled and scratched his head sheepishly. As expected of someone from the police force, he was very thoughtful. Oscar's smile froze on his face. He stretched out a finger and pointed at the ground, making a gesture for silence. Right in front of us, in the flickering candlelight, a new shadow appeared, beside the shadows cast by the dozen or so corpses hanging from the beams. It was lying low to the ground and trembling slightly. Oscar quietly raised the gun behind him and fired a shot at the beam. Rubble fell down with a clatter, and the shadow on the ground flickered and disappeared. Due to the violent shaking, one or two of the corpses hanging from the beam fell down. I don't know what the hell that was. Damn it. It's so unlucky. Liam and Oscar moved the fallen corpses to one side of the main hall with disgust. Unexpectedly, a clanging object fell from one of the corpses. It was small and had a metallic sheen. Oscar picked it up and looked at it by the candlelight, muttering to himself, "Damn it, what is this?" Chi did follow the victims. He had only taken one look, but his eyes seemed to have been burned by fire. He turned on his headlamp and looked at it carefully, repeatedly. After reading it, he cursed, "Damn it, it's so damn strange. This corpse actually has a bullet casing necklace. That's exactly the same as mine." I leaned in for a closer look. It was a retro necklace made of real bullet casings. Logically speaking, these corpses should be products of ancient sacrifices. They shouldn't have something like this on them. It's not impossible that the bodies are from modern times. I comforted Oscar. Are you sure it's exactly the same as your necklace? Liam leaned over and picked it up to take a look. There's a number on the bullet casing. Look, it's exactly the same as mine. He took out the necklace from his neck. My scalp went numb. Damn it, they were, indeed, exactly the same. The body on the ground was severely dehydrated. The entire body had dried up and shrunk into a ball. The surface of the body was covered with a layer of ash, and it was impossible to tell what it originally looked like. Even the clothes on the body were worn out, with only a trace of cloth left at the neckline. It was impossible to tell what material the clothes were made of. Oscar threw the necklace back onto the corpse in disgust, kicking up a layer of dust. Liam couldn't help but sneeze and covered his nose. No, did I miss something? I turned up the brightness of my headlamp and carefully examined the corpse. I found that the layer of ash on the corpse was actually a layer of copper-green fluff, very similar to the green hair that grew from mold. This green hair reminded me of the severed hand in the wooden box. This is not ash on the body, it's green hair. These corpses are not human, they're monsters. Liam and Oscar looked at each other, their faces turning ugly. It's too damn evil. Let's go tie up the raft. Let's leave this ghostly place early. Liam was a little overwhelmed. There were a few ready-made wooden sticks in the open space in front of the church, just enough to tie up a raft. The three of us worked together and quickly tied up a raft, sweating all over. When the three of us returned to the church, intending to drink some water and take our things to leave, we all started to scratch ourselves frantically. I tried my best to endure the excruciating itching rolled up my sleeves, and watched in a daze as the hairs on my body grew longer, greener, and sprouted like spores. I couldn't help but cry out. Liam and Oscar were the same. Our hands trembling, we opened the medicine box and poured antiviral and anti-allergy medicine into our mouths. We broke out in another round of sticky sweat. We didn't know if it was the medicine taking effect or psychological effect, but our bodies didn't seem to itch as much anymore. However, the green hair on our bodies didn't seem to want to go away at all. Just then, there was a crashing sound from outside the church door. We tiptoed to the door and peeked through the crack. Holy crap! 3 or 4 green-haired water monsters had torn apart the raft we had just tied up and piled it up in front of the church door. They were ramming the church door one by one. The old and dilapidated door panels were creaking as if they were about to burst. We were already quite annoyed, so we decided to fight back. Liam and Oscar, one up and one down, stabbed the monster that was hitting the door through the crack with their daggers. Blood, red and green, flowed into the church through the crack. I pushed open a corner of the window in the main hall and tried to attack from the side with my shotgun. The moment I pushed open the window, I realized that it had gotten dark without me knowing. The afterglow of the setting sun was shining on the hairy heads of the corpses hanging from the ceiling of the church. A terrifying thought poured down on me like ice water. Maybe the corpses in this cult church weren't monsters at all, but people who had died from being infected with a mysterious fungus. The green mist on their bodies was the mature spores. So from the moment we entered the church, it was destined that we would become monsters covered in green hair. And the green-haired monsters outside the door were probably the group of residents who had come to the island to check on the situation before. After a round of fighting, the crashing sound outside the door gradually subsided. Oscar and Liam directly opened the door and shot with their guns. I came back to my senses and rushed over, but it was too late. Blood flowed all over the ground outside the door, and there was not a single survivor. Oh, well, these people had already lost their humanity after they mutated. Now it was either them or us. We couldn't afford to be soft-hearted. After the battle, the three of us were almost exhausted and collapsed to the ground. I told Liam and Oscar about my guess. Now that the three of us are starting to grow green hair, it's probably true. We're done for. Liam lifted a corner of his clothes to wipe the sweat from his face, reviewing the newly emerged green fluff on his stomach, a look of despair on his face. There were green-haired monsters outside the church and germs inside the church. It was a desperate situation. Now that the sun had set, it was time for the monsters to roam around. It wasn't suitable to leave the island. We discussed it and decided that between two evils, we should choose the lesser one. We should stay alive for now. So we temporarily stayed in the church. We would leave the island early tomorrow morning, when the sun came out, and shoot those monsters. Oscar let out a long sigh and said to Liam and me, "I'm sorry, my friends. I shouldn't have asked you two to come to the island. Now you're in danger because of me. If anything happens to you two, I won't be able to atone for my sins, even if I die 10,000 times." Liam and I comforted him, saying that our original intention. Moreover, it was not yet a desperate situation. Oscar nodded with tears in his eyes. That night, the three of us lay down in our sleeping bags in the church, fully clothed. Extreme fatigue and itchy discomfort made us toss and turn between sleep and wakefulness. It seemed to be midnight when there was a sound of something falling from the direction of the side hall. It was very light, like it had fallen on the tip of someone's heart. We were suddenly alert and looked at each other, silently turning on our headlamps. I motioned for Liam to stay in the main hall. I would go to the left side hall, and Oscar would go to the right side hall. I had practiced martial arts since I was young, although my physical condition was not optimistic. No, I still had some foundation and courage. Oscar loaded his gun. I held my electric baton, and we walked into the two side halls, one to the left and one to the right. The window in the left side hall seemed to be smaller. The moonlight in the middle of the night leaked in through the window and onto the bricks, like frost or snow. In the middle of the hall was an altar. In front of the altar was a table with a candlestick and a few burnt-out candles on it. There were a few straw cushions scattered on the ground in front of the table. By the window of the hall hung a few curtains of indistinguishable color, giving off an indescribable sense of suffocation. Just as I was about to go over and see if there was anyone hiding behind the curtains, I heard a burst of rapid gunfire coming from the main hall. I hurried out. As soon as I stepped out of the left side hall, I saw Oscar pointing a gun at me. "Oscar, what are you doing?" My head buzzed. At this moment, most of the candles in the main hall had been extinguished. In the entwined light and shadow, Liam was lying on the ground, covered in blood, pointing at me with his blood-stained finger. "It's him. It's Ethan. He wants to kill me." "What's going on?" "Oscar, Liam, I've been in the left side hall the whole time, really. I only came out when I heard gunshots. I was at a loss for words." Oscar loaded his gun, and blood kept pouring out of Liam's mouth. "I saw your back just now." Oscar's tone was devoid of any warmth. "Wait, why? There has to be a reason why I would kill Liam, right?" I couldn't help but cough a few times in agitation. "You can't just say it was me based on a back view, right?" "But I saw your face." "Ethan, what else do you have to say?" Liam was dying, his eyes filled with deep disappointment and hatred. "There are monsters outside the church, and the mysterious shadow inside the church. Damn it, even if I wanted to kill you two, it wouldn't be now." I desperately defended myself. "You finally admit it." Oscar approached me step by step with his gun pointed at me. "What the hell am I admitting to?" "Liam is my brother." Are we both angry and annoyed, my heart pounding against my chest? The intense emotional agitation left me short of breath, and my vision gradually blurred. I swayed and fell to the ground. A sense of powerlessness and despair binding me tightly like ropes. Bang, bang, 2 gunshots. In my hazy vision, Mian's already greenish body twitched twice with the gunshots and lay still on the ground. Oscar's right wrist was broken, and his gun fell to the ground, landing at the feet of a dark figure. The dark figure stepped out of the darkness, step by step. Under Oscar's horrified and disbelieving gaze, he fired 2 more shots at Oscar, then another shot at Liam, making sure they were both dead before taking off his hood. I struggled to open my eyes to see clearly. The shock was no less than that of humans seeing a spaceship. He looked exactly like me. He was a greener version of me. In my line of sight, he slowly rippled like water, becoming narrower and narrower until he sank into the boundless darkness. This was another monster. I forced myself to sit up and bit the tip of my tongue hard to stay awake. He walked up to me step by step, put the gun to my head, and said word by word, "Sorry, only one of us can live. In that case, why kill them? You can just kill me," I said, gasping for breath. Humpy, acting all noble. "Not kill them. Are you going to wait for them to share these earth-shattering discoveries? Do you still remember how those people laughed at you? They almost said that you don't deserve to live and waste food, researching mysterious creatures. You were out of your mind to choose this major in the first place. It's too difficult to make achievements. Your mentor, Professor Benedict, died with his eyes open. Why, tell me, why?" He squatted down in front of me and poked my forehead with his gun. "What earth-shattering discoveries?" I gritted my teeth and asked. He laughed out loud. "Didn't you find out? There are a large number of high-quality meteorites buried under this church. Any one of them would be enough to shock the academic world. And these meteorites cut through time and space. You and I are from different worlds, but we have the same fate. I'm going to take all these discoveries. Those who stand in my way will die." So that's how it was. I said that the magnetic field in and around the church felt strange. Liam mentioned it at the time, but I didn't think much of it. Now that I think about it, it was my biggest mistake. I don't want to be Van Gogh or Mozart, unknown, when a live dignity trampled into the dirt by mediocre people worshipped after death, nailed to the cross of art, consumed and nibbled by a large group of people. Be like Einstein, like Newton, great in life, immortal in death. On. He was like a madman, giving a speech, saying all the resentment in my heart. So such a Molini was actually so ugly. I felt for the electric baton that had fallen on the ground just now and thrust it at him with all my might. He fell to the ground in disbelief, his whole body convulsing. How long does it take for a person to admit their mediocrity? How much courage does it take to make peace with yourself and allow yourself to be mediocre? This is probably a lifelong lesson for most of us. I closed my eyes and poked him with the electric baton until his whole body was smoking. He was foaming at the mouth and his eyes rolled back. So he was finally relieved, wasn't he? I dragged his body step by step to the outside of the church and threw it into the river. Unexpectedly, the moment I threw him into the river, I used too much force. The wooden box containing the severed hand in my pocket was thrown into the river along with the body and was instantly swept away by the waves. I watched with great regret as the wooden box drifted further and further away. It seemed that I was really destined to be apart from this severed hand. The sun rose, the morning dew dried, and after a long, dark night, dawn finally came. The sound of a motor could be heard in the distance, as if it were a boat. I waved my hand excitedly. Maybe it was too far away and they couldn't see me. I took out my mini binoculars, but with just one glance, I felt like I had been struck by lightning. Damn it. It was another boatload of us. By us, I mean Lee, Leon, and Oscar. I ran as fast as I could back to the church and found that the bodies of Oscar and Liam, covered in green hair, had been hung up on the beams one by one, with ropes by someone. Filled with anger, I climbed up the pillar, gripping the beam trying to untie the ropes. I thought I had to at least bury them, didn't I? At this time the sun had already risen, and when the sunlight shone on these corpses, they visibly dried up and shriveled. The clothes on their bodies had been corroded by spores and quickly turned into old rags in the sunlight. I squatted on the beam, wanting to reach out and touch them to make sure I wasn't dreaming. The moment the sunlight shone on me, my fingers started to smoke. The intense burning sensation almost made me fall off the beam. So after being infected with this fungus, one would be afraid of sunlight. No wonder those monsters only roared in the shade of the trees and in the water during the day, and only dared to move after dusk. As the sunlight shifted, it shone on the bloodstains on the ground. These bloodstains actually slowly turned into a green mist and dissipated into the air. No wonder we always felt like there was a layer of fog in the church when we first entered, and everything looked like it was behind a veil. It turned out to be blood mist. Our traces disappeared without a trace, and everything seemed to have returned to the way it was when we first entered the ancient church. I couldn't help but close my eyes and comfort myself. It was just a nightmare. Everything would be fine when I woke up. I should still be in the wooden house, never having been to any island. Yes, that must be it. Just then, I heard Liam's voice not far from the church door. Ethan, Oscar, this way. Quick, there's a church ahead. Soon the church door creaked open, and then Liam pointed at me, who had just entered the church, and reminded him of the severed hand on his shoulder. I was startled at first, then calmly pulled off the severed hand hanging on my shoulder, and put it in the wooden box on my body. I couldn't help but close my eyes again, a sense of powerlessness piercing my heart like an arrow. I suddenly remembered that shortly after we entered the church and finished organizing our supplies, we found a shadow cast on the ground from the beams. Oscar was about to shoot at the beams. Cold sweat broke out on me. The moment I opened my eyes, Oscar was pointing his gun at my location. Bang, a gunshot. The silenced shotgun sounded like a fart. I hurriedly dodged and bumped into the rope hanging the corpses on the beam, causing all the corpses to shake. Follow, key team. 2 corpses fell down, one of which was Oscar, who had just been hung up on the beam. Oscar below fiddled with the corpse and found his necklace. He started discussing it with me and Liam. I clung tightly to the beam, drenched in a cold sweat, as if caught in a nightmare. Soon, they went out to tie up the raft, and then they started to itch all over and grow green hair. The sound of crashing started to come from outside the church door. They went to fight the monsters outside the church door. I took the opportunity to escape from the church through the air vent and went all the way to the water's edge. I gasped for air as if I had been suffocating, and finally had oxygen again. In the afterglow of the last ray of light on the horizon, I found that I was almost naked in the water, covered in long green hair. I was so scared that I almost fainted. The clothes on my body had been corroded by spores and turned into rags. Only one strap of my backpack was left hanging like weathered plastic. It fell apart as soon as I touched it. The things in my backpack were scattered on the ground. My small notebook, along with my pen, fell on the grass. I put on my gloves, picked up the pen with trembling hands, turned on my headlamp, and wrote, "By the time you see this letter, I should be dead." Coming to this island on a whim was the biggest mistake of my life. To whoever sees this letter, remember, never land on this island. I rolled up the letter, with my experience written on it, put it in an empty mineral water bottle, and threw it into the river. Sorry, you said that you in your dream wrote a letter and put it in a drifting bottle and threw it into the river. You said earlier that you picked up a drifting bottle when you were 17. Is there any connection between the two? I couldn't help but interrupt the young man's story again, tapping the record on the medical record with my pen. He frowned slightly and looked at me, seemingly unhappy with my interruption, but he still answered my question. That's right. The drifting bottle I picked up was the one that the me in my dream threw into the river. Ever since I picked up this drifting bottle, when I was 17, and read this letter, I've been looking for this island. But the locals said that there is no such island at all, and there is no such person as Oscar. But I'm sure there is. Maybe it appeared and sank again, or maybe it hasn't appeared yet. I created these paintings based on the scenes he described, and the dreams I had. It can be said that without this drifting bottle, there would be none of these masterpieces that shocked the world. He stared into my eyes calmly, as if judging how much I believed in everything he said. Many patients with delusions of fantasy take their dreams as reality, and some can't distinguish between reality, fantasy, and dreams. Time and space are completely jumbled and fragmented for them. These patients are actually very painful. They are confused, their memories are chaotic, and they are tortured every day. If I understand correctly, according to your story, the lives of the two of you influenced each other, and they were both crucial and decisive influences. For example, your paintings influenced his life choices, and his drifting bottle opened up your dream world and led you to the path of artistic creation. That's one way to understand it. A hint of joy appeared on his face. He was very satisfied that I could say that. I wrote down the words drifting bottle on the paper. Is that bottle still there? Yes, I bought it. He rummaged through his backpack, took out an old mineral water bottle. The bottle had no label. A roll of paper was curled up inside the transparent bottle. He took it out and handed it to me. The paper was yellowed and old. I carefully unfolded it. The handwriting was messy, and there were some spelling mistakes. It was obvious that it was written in a hurry. Some sentences were a little incoherent. The person who wrote the letter was obviously panicking and confused, but it didn't mean anything. Many patients with delusions of fantasy had histrionic personality disorder, and some also had multiple personality disorder. This Ethan must have been ill since he was 17. If I heard correctly in your dream, in addition to a main self, there were other selves, gathered together because of time and space fragments. And you picked up the drifting bottle that the main self threw into the river. His brow relaxed a little. Yes, the meteorites under the church cut through time and space, causing time and space to be disordered, bringing us, who are in different spaces, together on the island. And it is very likely that the main self and I are in different times of the same space, or even in a time-space intersection. For some reason, his time and space and mind are twisted together like two wires, sometimes intertwined, sometimes separated, entangled with each other, influencing each other. My heart sank. He already took the dream as reality, and he even used the theory of parallel universes and quantum entanglement in physics to rationalize it, and believed it firmly. If I told him at this moment that he had delusions of fantasy, I guess he would fight me desperately. Excuse me for asking, since you believe in your dreams so firmly, Why did you come to see the psychiatrist? I stared into his eyes and asked. He sneered, rubbed his face with both hands, and said, "Don't you think I should see a psychiatrist? It's human nature. Just like the saying 3 men make a tiger, something you were originally very sure of. When people around you repeatedly deny your thoughts and instill the opposite point of view, gradually even you will doubt if you have a problem. If you are lucky enough to stick to your original thoughts, you will be whipped by the foolish eyes of those around you until you give in or break down." His eyes reddened, and he continued in a hoarse voice. "I've been to countless psychiatric departments and seen no less than 10 psychiatrists, just to see if anyone can believe me, so that everyone, including myself, doesn't think I have a mental illness, but just an ordinary person with a peculiar experience." I understood his pain, but as a doctor, I couldn't violate my professional ethics to comfort him against my better judgment and tell him that there was nothing wrong with his mind. "Sorry, your dream, is too bizarre. It's beyond our comprehension." I tried to explain my doubts to him and returned the drifting bottle to him. "If you feel tired, we can continue another day." He took a deep breath, waved his hand, interrupted me, and said he was fine. Under the solitary moon, the river reflected my distorted self. I couldn't help but let out a howl of despair, shrill and helpless. I was burning all over, as if bitten by hundreds of insects. The pain and itch were unbearable. I rolled on the ground and fell into the water with a splash, creating a large spray. The water was cool and refreshing, much more comfortable. 3 or 4 green monsters, with red eyes, wide mouths, and sharp teeth, were lurking in the water, watching me quietly. My heart skipped a beat, and I swam away with all my might. But they didn't chase after me. Suddenly I realized that I had become one of them. I surfaced, and the clear river water reflected my black eyes. Perhaps this was the only difference between us. But why was I different from them? I suddenly realized that at this moment, I no longer had a headache or nausea, and I was no longer weak. It seemed that the reason why I was different from them and still had a trace of consciousness was probably because I had been infected with malaria, which neutralized part of the toxin. I really didn't know whether this was fortunate or unfortunate. Soon dawn came again, bringing with it the sound of motors and human voices. Another boatload of fierce cane. I hurriedly swam towards them and shouted, "Stop. Go back." But what came out was a terrifying roar. Soon the monsters in the water attacked them. They fled to the shore. I rushed to the me who had just landed on the island at the fastest speed, grabbed his shoulder tightly with one hand, and tried hard to shout at him, "Go back. Go back quickly." Then, shh. He was terrified and slashed at my hand with the dagger in his hand. The sharp blade fell and blood splattered everywhere. My hand was severed, but it still clung to his clothes. Another Oscar rushed forward and shot me twice. I endured the sharp pain and rolled to the ground, falling into the river. "Excuse me." I couldn't help but interrupt the young man's story for the 3rd time. To put it mildly, this story was mind-boggling. To put it bluntly, it was too convoluted. I was completely confused and had to confirm it. "I don't quite understand." "You mean the severed hand in the box that Oscar gave you was actually your own hand? And it was another you who landed on the island later who cut off your hand and put it in the box. Then it fell into the river and was picked up by a fisherman who gave it to Oscar. It's a loop, right?" The corners of his mouth curled up slightly, and he smiled. "Dr. Mina, You're the first doctor who's heard this and realized it's a loop. Yes, I went to the island with the severed hand that Oscar gave me, but I lost it on the way when I was fighting the water monster. Then I cut off the hand of another me and put it in the box. When I killed the me in the church and threw his body into the river, the box and the severed hand fell into the river. In the morning, it was caught by a fisherman and sent to Oscar. Oscar took the severed hand to find Lem and Minnie. It's a circle a bit convoluted, isn't it? I really wanted to politely say that it wasn't convoluted, but I couldn't bring myself to say that to comfort him against my better judgment. I rubbed my sore temples and wrote down the word severed hand on the paper, and I gestured for him to continue. I buried my head in the water plants. After a long time, I finally recovered from the sharp pain. I didn't want to die here. I hadn't finished my project yet, and I hadn't realized my dream and my mentor's dream. No matter what, I had to prove that the study of mysterious creatures wasn't a useless major, and I wasn't a good-for-nothing. I wanted to achieve success and fame. I didn't want to be a loser. I paddled hard and swam towards the riverbank. I swam and swam. I don't know how long it took. Before dawn came again, I finally reached the riverbank. I staggered out of the river and was seen by an old lady who got up early. She screamed and turned to flee. I shouted at her, "Don't be afraid, I'm not a water monster." But she ran even faster. Soon she came back to the riverbank with a group of weapon-wielding residents and a skull. Without saying a word, he pointed his gun at me and shot. It hurt so much. It felt like my ribs were broken. I let out a scream and ran towards the river desperately. They followed closely behind. The moment I jumped into the river, bang, 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 3 or 4 bullets shot into my body, one of which embedded itself in my heart. Blood mist scattered. The moment I fell into the water, I saw another me and another Liam squeezing out of the crowd. Oh, so that's how it was. With a plop, I sank into the water. The water enveloped me from all directions, giving me an illusion of warmth. I opened my eyes wide. Blood gushed out and mixed with the water. In the midst of the blood wade, I slowly sank to the riverbed and lay among countless corpses of monsters, with one hand missing among the corpses of me at different stages of decay. That's right. When we first arrived at the river, we encountered residents fighting a monster. That monster was another me, but I didn't know it at the time. In other words, the loop and the parallel universe may have already begun. This time he stopped and explained it to me on his own initiative, saving me from the embarrassment of wanting to interrupt and ask him again. Excuse me for asking, have you been reading a lot of science fiction novels? He pursed his lips tightly, his face even paler, and his breathing became heavier. He paused for a good 7 or 8 seconds before saying, "You also think I'm making up stories? I thought there would always be a doctor who would believe me. It seems I was wrong." Oh no, he was having a major emotional breakdown. "Sorry, it's just too unbelievable. I apologize if I offended you." Actually, at that time, I was already certain that he had delusional disorder with a tendency for self-harm, but my professional ethics compelled me to apologize. He suddenly laughed. "You're very smart and patient, Doctor. Lina, you're the only one who's been able to pick up on all the key points and listen patiently until now. I didn't know if I was smart or not, but I was certain that he needed to be hospitalized." "Would you consider being hospitalized?" I asked tentatively. He was taken aback. "I mean, the experiences in your dreams are too thrilling and exciting, to the point that you're nervous and not sleeping well. I can help you adjust." I tried my best to downplay it and describe his condition calmly. Some of these patients also had violent tendencies. He smiled slightly. I'll follow your arrangements, Doctor. Nilina. As I was writing the hospitalization notice, he said, Actually, Doctor. Lena, I haven't finished yet. Do you still want to listen? I didn't want to listen, but his eyes were so sincere and pitiful that I couldn't bear to refuse. I nodded. Ethan, is it right or wrong for us to cling to our dreams all our lives? My mentor, Professor Benedict, held my hand with tears in his eyes as he lay dying. Professor, if I had the chance to do it all over again, I would still choose to study mysterious creatures. Just like Sisyphus pushing the boulder and Prometheus stealing fire, I have no regrets. Maybe I'm overestimating myself. Maybe the ending was doomed from the beginning, but I can't just give up without trying, without fighting, without even trying. My eyes welled up with tears, and they burned, knowing that it can't be done but still doing it. Aren't you stupid? No, I'm not. I sniffed and replied resolutely. Professor Benedict smiled and nodded, closing his eyes. A muddy tear slid down his pillow. Ethan, 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 wake up. Don't give up. It's your turn this time, okay? A distant and familiar voice seemed to ring in my ears. I tried hard to open my eyes to see, but I couldn't open them, no matter what. As if a century had passed, I finally opened my eyes, with all my might. I was still at the bottom of the water, still among the corpses of May. The difference was that my injuries had miraculously healed. I laughed and cried, howling strangely. Although I was still a monster, although I still had one hand missing, I was alive again. I struggled to swim towards the island. I'd rather die than give up now. I had to fulfill my dream. If it was really like what the meaning in the church said, that it was the meteorites buried under the church that cut through time and space, then these meteorites must be the key part that cut through the time and space matrix. So blowing them up should be able to destroy the matrix or the magnetic field and bring everything back to normal. As dusk fell, the setting sun was like gold. I swam back to the island and crawled out of the water cautiously, searching in the grass for the things that had fallen out of my broken backpack and into the bushes and weeds. I lay on the ground, feeling every inch of the ground and grass roots with my hairy hands. Finally, I found the corroded and rusty gadgets, one after another. I put on my gloves and headlamp, and for a moment it felt like I had just arrived on the island. It should be the time when the three of us were resting in the church. I quietly went around to the back of the ancient church, preparing to climb in through the back window. My headlamp shone on a desolate scene. However, in this desolation, there was a splat, splat sound. I shone my headlamp over and saw 3 or 4 water monsters lying on a huge black stone, sound asleep. One of them was even smacking its lips and sucking in its drool. As I was about to climb over the wall, the light from my headlamp startled one of the monsters. It opened its scarlet eyes and staggered towards me. I was startled. Shouldn't they treat me as one of their own? I looked down and saw that I was carrying a rope, wearing a headlamp, and had a backpack slung across my shoulder. I really didn't look like a real monster. The awakened monsters chased after me relentlessly. Fortunately, I was more agile and powerful after the mutation. I took out the rope and threw it towards the eaves of the church. My claws hooked onto it, and I climbed up at the fastest speed. The people in the church heard the commotion and came to the door to check. They happened to see the 3 or 4 monsters attacking the door. A fierce battle ensued. I took the opportunity to slip in through the air vent and climbed onto the beam. I ran into another me who was trying to escape. I quickly hid to the side and watched as he fled in a panic. The people in the church were all focused on the monsters outside the door. The strong smell of blood attracted more monsters to crawl out of the water and join the battle. I hung the rope around my waist, gripped the pillar in the main hall with my remaining hand, clamped my legs together, and slid down. Just as I was about to jump onto the table and get the meteorites, the battle was coming to an end. I had to hurriedly escape into the left side hall and hide in the curtains by the window. In the middle of the night, I dozed off and fell to the ground, making a very slight sound. I woke up with a start and hid myself as fast as I could. Soon the me in the church came into the left side hall to check, and then went out to start a bloodbath. I stayed put until everyone was either dead or had fled. When I was about to get to work, as soon as I stepped out of the left side hall, I saw another hairy me hanging from the beams. He calmly finished hanging all the corpses on the beams, then picked up his gun and pointed it at me. "Are you going up there yourself? Or should I hang you up there?" I opened my mouth wide, but I couldn't make a normal sound. He said with a hint of surprise, "You've completely mutated. Just in time to take you back as a live specimen. This is much more convincing than photos." He approached me with a gun in one hand and a rope in the other. The moment he put the rope around my neck, I quickly snatched the gun from his hand and pointed it at his head. He was both surprised and terrified, stammering, You can't kill me. I did all this to fulfill our dream. You and I are originally the same person, just in different spaces, right? How about this? I'll let you go, and we'll just pretend this never happened, okay? You're not me, and I'm not you. You know, even if we have the same dream and goal, our bottom lines are different. I closed my eyes and pulled the trigger. He fell to the cold ground, his eyes wide with unwillingness and despair. Blood slowly oozed out of his head. I jumped off the table, ran to the entrance of the church basement, planted the pack of explosives, set the timer, pressed the switch, and fled the church. Dawn came again. I walked out to greet the sound of human voices and brushed past another me who was fleeing back to the church, his body starting to grow hair. Soon they landed on the island again. I passed by another, me completely mutated and covered in green hair, and grabbed the me who had just arrived on the island with my remaining hand. I said with all my might, "Go." He was terrified and slashed at my hand with his dagger. The sharp blade fell, and blood splattered everywhere. The severed hand still clung to his clothes. There was a deafening explosion from the church not far away. Flames shot into the sky, and explosions rang out one after another. The three people who had just landed on the island didn't even have time to pick up their unloaded equipment before they fled the island in a hurry. In their panic, they didn't forget to take a few pictures of me and the island, shouting excitedly, "We got it! We got the green-haired monster." The me who had fled amidst Lamb's curses calmly took off the severed hand, put it in the box, and put it in his pocket. I smiled and turned to walk towards the still exploding church. "Professor, he's gone with my hand and the photos. This time, it will definitely shock the academic world and clear the name of mysterious creature research. Does this count as the US achieving our dream? From now on, no one will say that we're wasting food, right?" Cephas was pushing the boulder, and Prometheus brought the stolen fire to mankind. It's a pity that I never found out who that voice that woke me up was. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to realize my dream. That's the end of the story, he said to me with a smile, revealing a knife full of white teeth. When I was in school, what I feared most was reading science fiction and suspense novels. Today, I really made up for it. Have you heard of quantum entanglement, Doctor? Mia. Yes, but I don't really understand what it is. As a doctor, I felt a little guilty for the first time. Quantum entanglement, to put it simply, is like two Earths in different space-times. Note that it's space-times, not just spaces. These two Earths are rotating on their axes while revolving around the sun, but their directions of rotation and revolution are diametrically opposite. If you change the direction or state of one, it will inevitably affect the direction or state of the other. That's roughly what it means. My brain was fried. But what he said next made my brain spin. Although I'm not sure if he and I are in different space-times, I want to do an experiment. According to the theory of quantum entanglement, if I die, will that me be able to escape from the island, live a good life, and even achieve fame and success? Actually, the last part was just me filling in the blanks. It was my reasoning about the impact of my suicide on the other side. He smiled like a mischievous child. Ethan, actually, you don't have to do this experiment. You only live once, you can't just use it for experiments, I said dryly, feeling a little flustered. He was actually suicidal. This is what I owe him. I've owed him this ever since I picked up that drifting bottle when I was 17. I created the Unshakable Island series of paintings based on his descriptions and won the world's highest award, becoming internationally renowned. But he's struggling in another space-time, constantly setting off and dying. I want to save him. I have to save him. People who have achieved fame and success can never understand the persistence, the day and night yearning for success, and the desire to prove themselves of those who are frustrated. But I can. I've experienced everything he has in my dreams. He was very emotional and even shed tears. I comforted him and said that I understood, that I got it. Actually, I didn't get it at all. In the end, he went through the hospitalization procedures. I made a series of treatment plans for him, according to his delusional disorder. However, a month later, he committed suicide by cutting his wrists with a razor. By the time he was found, he had basically bled to death. I was transferred out of the psychiatric department because of this incident. 3 years later, I was in my office, watching the live broadcast of the annual Nobel Prize ceremony, when I saw the winner of the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine take the stage to give his speech. It was like a bolt from the blue. It was a middle-aged Ethan and his partner named Liam. They had jointly invented a new drug that could treat malaria. This drug was not only a special drug for treating malaria, but also a preventive measure. The Ethan on TV said that he and his partner had a strange encounter a few years ago. They obtained a severed hand from a green-haired monster and extracted a very powerful virus from it. This virus happened to be able to kill the parasite that caused malaria. The TV station did a special interview about his drug. I held my breath and watched intently. He said that he personally cut off this severed hand from a monster. He also took many photos. He said that after he came back, he had many dreams, dreaming that he was a painter, painting many paintings related to green-haired monsters, winning international awards, achieving fame and success at a young age. But he always wanted to commit suicide to save a person. Finally, his suicide was successful, and he woke up another himself, who had died in another world. It's unbelievable, truly unbelievable. The Ethan on TV shook his head in bewilderment. Although they looked very similar, I could tell for sure that he wasn't the Ethan I mean, but another Ethan, the Ethan in the dream. After watching the interview, My back was drenched in cold sweat. I looked back at the drifting bottle that Ethan had given me before his death 2 years ago. Guilt washed over me, almost suffocating me, and I collapsed to the ground. Dr. Lena, what's wrong? A nurse on duty helped me up. I killed Ethan, that patient, the one who came to see me in the psychiatric department 3 years ago. Quit, please. Help me back to the psychiatric department. I was dizzy, and my heart was pounding as if I was sick. The nurse looked puzzled, but she still handed over her work and took me back to the psychiatric department. Dr. Lena, are you mistaken? I checked the records. There's no record of a patient named Ethan Wynn, and you applied to be transferred out of the psychiatric department yourself. It wasn't because of any medical accident. Emily, the head nurse in charge of the records, looked at me with some helplessness. I clearly remember. Alice, Catherine, you were both there at the time that Ethan Wynn was Alice's patient. Alice, do you remember? It was 3 years ago. Ethan Wynn ended up committing suicide by cutting his wrists. You were the first one to find him and fainted from fright. Dr. Lena, Charmaine. I under too much stress. Alice looked confused, as if she couldn't recall such a thing at all. Look at this. I clicked open the video on my phone with trembling hands. You found the part where Ethan was being interviewed. Look, have you ever seen this man? I stared at them intently. No. Without exception, they all shook their heads. I remember Alice pointed at him and said, overjoyed. I looked at her. Isn't this Ethan Wynn, the great scientist who won the Nobel Prize in physiology or medicine? What else? Nothing. Nothing. There's an Ethan Wynn who looks exactly like him who's never been hospitalized in our hospital. You've never taken care of him. I almost gouged my eyeballs out and stuck them on Alice's face to make her see. She still looked confused and shook her head. I don't know how I walked out of the psychiatric department. I finally understood how Ethan felt back then. Most resentful, grieved, puzzled, and anxious. I desperately wanted someone to say to me, I believe you. I remember there really was such a person. Unfortunately, there wasn't. A month later, I submitted my resignation letter. It read, I am suffering from depression and am no longer fit to work on the front lines of healthcare. At night, I lay alone in a lounge chair in the nursing home, gazing up at the vast, starry sky. It's alone and lonely. A brilliant galaxy, a boundless universe. This world is far more complex than we imagine, and many problems are beyond our comprehension. But if one day we encounter them, we are destined to become the lonely ones, who are not understood by anyone in this world. And this loneliness will be our eternal secret.